Have you ever walked away from someone and they acted like they didn't care? They smiled. They stayed quiet. But deep down, they were breaking. Some people are really good at pretending. They'll act like your absence doesn't matter, like your silence is no big deal. But the truth is, when someone truly had access to your heart, your energy, your time, and then you remove it all, they feel it more than they'll ever admit. At first, they may act proud, maybe even cold. They might tell themselves they're better off, that they don't need you, that they're fine without you. But slowly, something inside them shifts. Because when someone was used to your presence, your kindness, your attention, your absence becomes loud. They feel the emptiness in moments they didn't expect. Maybe it's when they wake up and no longer see a message from you. Maybe it's when they sit alone and realize they have no one who listens like you did. Maybe it's when they reach for their phone to tell you something out of habit, and remember, you're no longer there. That's when it hits, quietly, slowly, deeply. They remember the little things, the way you always checked in, the way you forgave when they didn't deserve it, the way you stayed, even when it hurt you to stay. And now they feel something they can't explain, a mix of guilt, confusion, and loss. But their pride will never let them say it out loud, so they suffer in silence. They might try to distract themselves, go out more, post pictures, laugh louder, pretend they're unaffected, but pretending doesn't erase the truth. The truth is, they miss you, not just the attention, not just the comfort. They miss you, the soul, the energy, the loyalty that they thought they could take for granted. And here's the twist. The longer you stay silent, the more they feel it. They start questioning everything. Did I mess this up? Are they really gone for good? Did I wait too long to care? They may not say a word. They may not show a sign. But they're watching. They're thinking. They're hurting. And while they're stuck in that cycle, something powerful happens to you. You begin to see things clearly. You realize how much energy you were giving to someone who never gave it back. You realize peace is better than begging. Respect is better than chasing. Silence is better than constant explaining. Because you finally understand this, love doesn't need to beg. Worth doesn't need to fight to be seen. And walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You didn't leave to get attention. You left to get your power back. And no matter what they feel now, the fear, the regret, the longing, it's no longer your job to fix it. You did your part. You gave your heart. Now it's time to protect your peace. So if you've ever been made to feel like you were too much or not enough, let this be your reminder. You are more powerful than you think, and when you walk away from the wrong people, you walk straight toward the right version of you. Comment below, I choose peace over begging. And remember, the strongest move is often the quietest one. 1. Confusion. They didn't expect you to actually leave. Not really. They thought you were just upset. They thought you'd cool off, come back, keep trying like you always did. So when you finally walked away, quietly, with no drama, it shook them. Not because they believed you'd never go, but because deep down they believed you never could. That's the first thing they feel. Confusion, not sadness, not regret, just pure shock. Are they serious? Are they really done with me? They replay your last messages in their head, trying to find signs, trying to figure out where it shifted. But what confuses them the most is your calm. You didn't explode. You didn't explain. You just stopped showing up. And that hits harder than yelling ever could, because when someone who always gave, always stayed, always forgave, goes completely quiet, that silence becomes deafening. They start questioning everything, not because you said something dramatic, but because you said nothing at all. You didn't walk away to teach them a lesson. You walked away because they never believed you would. And now that simple silence is the loudest wake-up call they've ever felt. Second panic. The routine is broken. Everything they were used to, your good morning messages, your check-ins, your constant care, it's all gone. The one person who always showed up, no matter what, has disappeared. And now they feel it, not just the silence, not just the distance, but the loss of control. They panic because the dynamic has changed. Before they could read you, before they could predict your reaction, but now they can't. They reach for their phone, no message. They post something online, no response. They try to get your attention, nothing happens. You're not angry, you're not chasing, you're just gone. And that calm silence shakes them more than any argument ever did. Panic starts to creep in, because they realize something they never expected. They don't have access to you anymore. You're not waiting by the phone, you're not checking their page, you're not asking for closure, you're living. You're moving forward, and for the first time, they're not sure where you are or what you're feeling. That mystery, that distance, it makes them feel unstable because now they know you don't need them. You're not dependent on their attention, their validation, or their approval. And that truth, that's what really sends them into panic. Third, ego pain. This part doesn't just hurt their heart, it bruises their pride, because in their mind you were supposed to chase. You were supposed to wait. You were supposed to stay stuck on them, no matter how they treated you. But now, they're the one left wondering if you've moved on, wondering why you're not reaching out, wondering how they lost the person who never gave up. And that stings. Not because they loved you so deeply, but because they never thought you would be the one to walk away first. For some people, the ego speaks louder than their emotions. They don't want to admit they miss you. They don't want to admit they care. So they act unbothered. They act cold. But inside, it's eating at them. Because your silence, your distance, it told them something they never wanted to hear. You hold the power now. Not because you're playing games, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you finally stopped giving it away. And for someone who relied on your effort, your patience, your loyalty, that shift in power is a blow to the ego they never saw coming. Quatrième. Regret. Regret never arrives early. It waits until everything is quiet. Until the noise fades, the ego cools down, and the room feels empty. It comes in like a shadow at night, slow, heavy, and impossible to ignore. At first, they didn't feel much. Maybe they felt free. Maybe they even told themselves, good, it's better this way. They scrolled, laughed, posted, went on like nothing happened. But it's always temporary. Because real regret doesn't show up when you're surrounded by people. It shows up when you're alone with your thoughts. And that's when they start remembering. Not just the big fights, not just the moments that went wrong, but all the small things that now feel like everything. They remember how you used to check in, even when they didn't respond. They remember how you made space for their feelings, even when they ignored yours. They remember how you smiled through the pain, because you cared more about keeping the connection alive than protecting your own heart. They think about the texts they didn't answer, the calls they let ring, the times they left you wondering if you were asking for too much, when in truth, you were only asking to be loved with the same care you gave. And what hurts the most? You were consistent, you were loyal, you were always there, even when you had every reason to leave. But they didn't see that then. They were so used to your presence, they forgot it was a choice. They were so used to your effort, they thought it was endless. They believed you'd always come back, that you'd always forgive. So they didn't take care of your heart. They treated your love like it would never run out. Now they see what they couldn't before, that your love wasn't just kind, it was rare. You didn't just show up. You stayed. You didn't just support them. You carried them when they were too weak to stand. And you did it all while trying to hold yourself together in silence. But you're gone now, not with anger, not with bitterness, just gone. And that quiet absence speaks louder than anything you could have said. Now, the space you once filled feels colder. The messages you used to send never come. The comfort of knowing you were there is gone. They look back and realize how easy it would have been to appreciate you, to reply with softness instead of silence, to say thank you instead of acting entitled, to say I'm sorry before it was too late. But now the door is closed, not slammed, not locked with hate, just gently closed, with no sign of reopening. And that's the part that eats at them, because they realize they didn't lose someone who gave up too soon. They lost someone who held on for far too long, someone who had every reason to leave sooner, but stayed out of love, someone who deserved more, but kept giving more instead. Now they'd give anything to go back, to hold your hand, to listen when it mattered, to undo the damage. But time doesn't rewind. And you? You've changed. You no longer live in that place of hoping, waiting, explaining. You've outgrown the version of yourself that begged to be seen. Their regret is real, but it's theirs to carry now, because you finally chose peace, and this time you're not turning around. 5. Jealousy. You may not be with anyone else. You may be fully focused on healing, on building your peace, on finally learning how to pour into yourself the way you used to pour into them. But their mind doesn't know that. And more importantly, it doesn't care. Because when someone loses access to you, especially after taking you for granted, the imagination starts doing the damage. They wonder, what if someone else is getting their attention now? What if they're laughing with someone new the way they used to laugh with me? What if I've been replaced and they're not even thinking about me anymore? These thoughts come in waves. At first, they try to push them away. They tell themselves it's not a big deal, that they're fine, that they've moved on too. But the mind is relentless when it's filled with unanswered questions. And when someone who was once always visible suddenly becomes silent, that silence becomes torture. So they start watching. They become a quiet observer in your world, checking your stories, opening your profile from a second account, scrolling through your old photos, reading the captions, analyzing the comments, looking for signs of someone new, trying to spot a new name, a shadow in the background, a clue that they've been replaced. But here's the thing, they find nothing, because you're not trying to be seen anymore. You've gone quiet, private, protected. And that makes their jealousy even worse, because the unknown is always more painful than the truth. Their mind fills in the blanks with fear and insecurity. They imagine you with someone who actually listens, someone who gives you the respect and warmth they never did, someone who laughs at your jokes, celebrates your growth, and holds your hand without making you feel like a burden. And suddenly, they see what they lost. Not because you told them, not because you posted about it, but because the possibility of someone else getting the version of you they took for granted is unbearable. Now, the things they once rolled their eyes at, your kindness, your overthinking, your deep loyalty, those are the very things they miss the most. They think back to the way you stayed up late to make sure they were okay, the way you noticed when they were off, even when they said, "I'm fine," the way you gave them your full attention, while they gave you half of theirs. And now they picture someone else getting that same love, that same effort, that same energy, and it eats them alive. They may have acted like you were replaceable. They may have even believed it for a while. But now they know the truth. You weren't just another person. You were the one who actually cared. And no matter who they try to distract themselves with, no one compares. And here's the irony. They may never have told you how much you meant. They may never have shown it when it mattered. But now that you're gone, now that you're silent, their jealousy is screaming louder than anything else, because they know you gave them the best parts of you, your loyalty, your softness, your time, your love, and they wasted it. Now they sit in silence, watching you from a distance, wondering if someone else is appreciating everything they took for granted, and that thought alone hurts more than losing you ever did. 6. Shame. They remember, even if they pretend they don't, even if they keep moving like everything is fine, they remember. They remember the times you sat there, barely holding yourself together, trying to explain how something hurt you, how something felt off, how all you wanted was to feel like you mattered. They remember the blank look on their face, the cold answers, the way they brushed your feelings aside like you were overreacting. They remember the sighs, the eye rolls, the "you're too sensitive" comments. They remember how you stayed, even when it was breaking you, how you forgave things you never should have accepted, just to keep the connection alive. They remember how you lowered your voice to avoid arguments, how you softened your boundaries just to make things easier, how you kept showing up, hoping that maybe this time they'd see you, this time they'd care. And they didn't. Not because they didn't notice, but because they didn't think they had to. You were always there. You always came back. So they never imagined a version of you that would actually leave. Until you did. But you didn't leave in anger. You didn't explode or break things or scream. You didn't try to get even. You didn't threaten to leave to get attention. You just quietly disappeared. No long message, no dramatic exit. Just stillness. And that's what hits the hardest, because it wasn't revenge. It wasn't you trying to guilt them. It was you finally understanding that you deserve better than begging for bare minimum love. It was you choosing peace over pain, silence over arguments, freedom over emotional exhaustion. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson, but they're learning anyway. And now the shame begins to rise. Not because anyone pointed a finger, but because they finally see themselves in the mirror your absence created. They remember every time you gave love without conditions, and how they responded with pride, ego, or distance. They remember how they made you feel like too much, when all you ever gave was more than enough. And the worst part, they realized they didn't just lose someone who loved them. They lost someone who should have never had to fight that hard to be loved in the first place. They see it clearly now. You weren't dramatic. You weren't clingy. You were consistent. You were honest. You were loyal. And they took it all for granted. Now they sit in the quiet. There's no one left to blame. No fight to distract them. No back and forth to hide behind. Just silence. Your silence. Your peace. And it eats at them. Because you never needed to punish them. You just needed to leave. And in doing so, you did something they never expected. You forced them to face themselves. Now they carry that shame. Not because you wanted them to suffer, but because when you stopped asking for love, they finally realized how little they gave. Your calm became the mirror they avoided for too long. Your silence became the truth they couldn't unhear, and your absence, that became the loudest thing they've ever felt. 7th obsession. They can't stop thinking about you. Even if they smile for the camera, post as if they're thriving, or joke around with their friends, none of it is real when the lights go off and the noise fades. Because behind the laughter, behind the distractions, behind the fake confidence, you still exist in the quiet corners of their mind. Not as a passing thought, but as a presence they can't shake. You are the one they told themselves they didn't need, the one they acted indifferent toward, the one they took for granted, thinking you'd always be within reach. And now, you're everywhere, in their memories, in their silence, in their regrets, but no longer in their life. They check their phone more often than they'll ever admit, not because they're expecting anyone else, but because a part of them still hopes to see your name pop up. Even after all this time, it's instinct, a reflex. Their fingers go to your chat window out of habit, only to see the same quiet screen staring back at them. They scroll through your old texts, reading words that once brought comfort. The good morning messages, the check-ins, the support, the way you always made sure they felt understood, even on their worst days. Back then, they saw those messages as normal, expected, almost routine. Now they realize they were sacred. Now they see that what you gave wasn't ordinary, it was rare. They open old photos, some they never even appreciated before, the way you smiled at them, the glow in your eyes, the way you showed up beside them, quietly, consistently, without asking for applause. They start to remember the details they overlooked, the soft tone in your voice when you asked if they were okay, the way you paid attention to things they didn't even know mattered to them. And suddenly, those little things become everything. And you? You're not just a memory now. You're a mystery, because you haven't said a word. No comment, no reply, no story they can read between the lines, no digital breadcrumbs for them to follow. Your silence has become the loudest truth they've ever heard. It's not angry, it's not bitter, it's final. They try to post things to get your attention. A quote, a photo, a status that they hope might trigger something in you. But nothing comes back. You don't bite. You don't even blink. And that makes them spiral. They never imagined a version of you that didn't respond, didn't care, didn't chase. So now they start chasing shadows. They ask mutual friends how you're doing, casually, like it's no big deal. They visit your profile from fake accounts, looking for hints. They scroll through your old posts, hoping there's a clue they missed. A date, a change in tone, a photo that might say something you're not saying out loud. But they find nothing, because you've gone private, distant, untouchable. You've stopped making your life open to the very person who misused the access when they had it. And that unknown, that unknowing becomes unbearable. They can't tell if you've moved on. They can't tell if you're happy. They can't tell if you even think about them anymore. And the not knowing starts to consume them. Because the less they know, the more they obsess. The more you protect your peace, the more they crave a piece of it. And the more they crave, the less they can have. They're losing control. And for someone who once felt so sure of your presence, that loss of control feels like suffocation. They lose sleep. They lose focus. Their mind drifts when it shouldn't. They replay conversations in their head, wondering what they could have said differently. They imagine different outcomes. They scroll through what-ifs and if-onlys like pages in a book they can't close. They start reaching, not physically, but mentally, emotionally. They send energy you no longer feel. They imagine conversations you're no longer having. They rehearse messages they never send. Because deep down, they know you're not waiting anymore. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're just gone, gracefully, completely, quietly. And that calm, confident absence, that's the center of their obsession, because you were never the problem. You were the peace. You were the person who held it all together while they pulled away. You were the one who gave when they just took. And now that you've finally stopped giving, they can't stop needing. They can't stop thinking about the version of you they once had, and the version of you they'll never get again. Not because you vanished, but because they let go of the one soul who truly cared. And now all they can do is remember, replay, and regret. And that loop, that's what obsession really looks like. 8. Fear. At first, they didn't panic. Your silence didn't scare them. They just assumed you needed space. A few days, maybe a week. They told themselves you'd calm down, that you'd reach out eventually, like you always did. Because in their mind, you were the constant, the safe one, the one who always forgave. You'd get hurt, maybe even cry, maybe pull back a little, but in the end, you always returned. So they waited, not in fear, but in confidence, because they believed your love was endless. They believed your patience had no limits. They believed they had time. But the days passed, then weeks, and then silence turned into a pattern, not a pause. No message, no phone call, no late night, "I miss you," to reopen the door. Not even a subtle social media post they could read between the lines, and that's when something unfamiliar began to rise in them, something slow, something heavy. Not guilt, not regret, not even sadness yet. It was fear, real fear. Not loud, dramatic fear. Not the kind that comes with tears or apologies or grand gestures. This fear was quiet, internal, heavy like a weight pressing on their chest at night. It began with a whisper. What if they're really gone? What if I waited too long to care? What if I pushed them past the point of no return? At first, they tried to push those thoughts away. They distracted themselves. They scrolled, they joked, they convinced themselves you were just being stubborn. But deep down, something felt different. This wasn't a temporary cold shoulder. This wasn't the silent treatment. This wasn't you trying to be dramatic. This was something they had never experienced before. Your absence. Not just physical absence, emotional detachment. The kind that doesn't come from anger, but from clarity, from exhaustion, from healing. And that terrified them. Because for the first time, they realized the door wasn't cracked open anymore. It was shut, gently, firmly, completely. That fear began to eat at them slowly, and then all at once. Because now they weren't just afraid of losing you, they were afraid of losing the chance to make it right, to undo the damage, to say what should have been said months ago. They started remembering. Every time you tried to open your heart and they brushed it off. Every tear you shed while they stayed silent. Every moment you asked for more, not with demands, but with quiet hope. And they gave you less. They remember ignoring your messages while you waited. They remember how you made excuses for their coldness, how you kept forgiving when they kept repeating the same cycles. They remember how you begged for peace while they brought you confusion. And now they realize it wasn't just your love they lost. It was time. Time to fix it. Time to treat you right. Time to show up before it was too late. And now, it is too late. That fear, it doesn't live only in their head. It begins to show up in small, desperate actions. A vague message, "Hey, just checking on you." A random like on an old post. A memory they post hoping you'll see it. Maybe even something emotional. "I've been thinking about you," or "Hope you're doing okay." But all of it, it's not communication. It's panic. A quiet attempt to pull you back, without admitting they pushed you away. And your response? Nothing. Not because you want to punish them. Not because you're playing games. But because you've changed. You no longer respond the way you used to. You don't take the bait. You don't feel responsible for their emotions anymore. You don't reply with softness to someone who met your pain with silence. They feel the shift, in your silence, in your boundaries, in your calm. This distance doesn't feel like a break anymore. It feels like closure. The kind they didn't ask for, but now have to live with. And that fear grows heavier, because they now understand You didn't just walk away. You healed. You became someone they can no longer access, someone who no longer needs their validation, someone who no longer needs to explain why you're done, because your absence says it all. They didn't just lose a person. They lost a version of you that loved them through the pain, that version who would have given them another chance, the version who still believed in their potential. And now, that version of you is gone. You didn't disappear because you were weak. You didn't stay silent because you were bitter. You walked away because you finally learned that love shouldn't have to hurt that much to be real. And that fear, the fear of knowing they had something beautiful and lost it because of their own choices, that fear will live with them far longer than your presence ever did. Because now they understand the deepest, most painful truth of all. You're not coming back, not because you're angry, but because you've grown past the point of return. 9. Respect too late. This is the part they truly never expected. Not when you cried, not when you sat there with tears in your eyes, trying to express how you felt while they rolled theirs. Not when you pleaded with them to meet you halfway, to just try, to show a fraction of the effort you were giving. Not when you swallowed your pride to fix things they broke. They didn't notice the strength it took to stay. They didn't notice the nights you couldn't sleep because your heart was carrying too much weight, theirs and your own. They didn't notice the moments you chose love over ego, softness over revenge, patience over pride. You stayed through their coldness. You stayed when it was easier to leave. You gave them your presence even when they gave you distance. And the saddest part, they mistook that for weakness. They believed your loyalty meant they could keep pushing and you'd never let go. But then you did. Not in the way they thought you would. You didn't explode. You didn't storm out with a list of everything they did wrong. You didn't throw their mistakes in their face. You didn't slam the door. You didn't even leave with a final warning. You just stopped. Stopped explaining yourself. Stopped asking to be seen. Stopped hoping they'd change. You walked away the way you lived the entire relationship, with grace, with calm, with dignity. And that shook them. Because they expected drama. They expected you to beg one last time, to send a paragraph they could ignore. They thought you'd fight for a place in their life. But you didn't. You just left, like someone who finally remembered who they are. And that silence, that absence, that gentle exit, it hit harder than any angry goodbye ever could. Because it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them feel what you felt. It was about finally choosing yourself. And now, they respect you. But not just because you walked away. They respect how you did it. They admire your calm. They admire your restraint. They admire your ability to disappear without a single word designed to wound. They admire how you didn't drag them through the mud or try to expose their flaws. Because deep down they know you had every right to, you had every reason to scream, to fight, to prove, but instead you walked away with peace. They think about that often now. They think about your quiet strength, your unconditional care, your unwavering presence. They remember how you held space for them when they didn't even know how to hold space for themselves. They remember how you forgave things most people wouldn't tolerate once, how you kept believing in them, even when they gave you every reason to stop. They remember how you stayed loyal in silence while they disrespected you in noise. They remember how they kept expecting you to break. And you didn't. You bent. You bent more than anyone should ever have to. But when it came time, you walked away like someone who had finally outgrown begging for the love they already gave. And now the respect they withheld is pouring in, quietly, internally, too late, but sincere. They see it now. You weren't weak for staying. You were strong for giving so much, even when you got so little. And you're even stronger now, for never going back. They may never say it out loud. Their pride might keep their mouth shut. But every time they remember how they treated you, they'll remember how you left. They'll feel that contrast, how they brought chaos and you brought peace, how they gave excuses and you gave grace, how they expected you to chase, and instead you chose silence. And that silence became the proof they never asked for, the proof that you were never the problem. You were the peace, you were the gift, you were the version of love that was real, and they missed it while looking for something louder, easier, or more temporary. You no longer crave their apology. You no longer wait for closure. You've already forgiven yourself for staying longer than you should have. You've stopped hoping they'll understand, because now you do. You understand that your value doesn't depend on their ability to see it. You've chosen clarity over chaos, self-respect over second chances. You've chosen growth over guilt. You've chosen you, finally, fully, unapologetically. And that's what truly sets you free, not just the fact that you walked away, but the fact that you will never again shrink to fit into someone else's idea of love. Because they didn't just lose someone who cared, they lost someone who never should have had to prove their worth in the first place, and now all they can do is admire you, from a distance they created, and a closeness they'll never feel again. If this spoke to your heart, if something inside you felt seen, if you found a piece of your story written between the lines, then take a breath and type these words below in the comments. I walk away with peace, not pain. Because walking away doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you were too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. It doesn't mean you gave up too easily. It means you finally saw the truth, not through their words, but through their actions. You saw how little effort they gave while you carried the weight of the connection. You saw how they made you question your worth instead of helping you believe in it. And in that moment of clarity, you chose something radical. You chose to stop explaining. You chose to stop waiting. You chose to stop trying to fix something you didn't break alone. You chose you. Most people think strength looks like yelling, like slamming doors, like dramatic exits and paragraphs sent at 2 a.m. But real strength, the kind that changes your life, is quiet. It's the silence you hold when everything in you wants to scream. It's the calm decision to protect your peace instead of proving your point. It's choosing not to send that last message, not to reopen the door, not to beg someone to treat you right. It's knowing that your worth was never meant to be debated. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not respond, is not chase, is not explain to people who were never really listening anyway. You no longer need to scream your value to people who closed their ears when you whispered for help. You no longer need to stay in rooms where your presence is unnoticed. You no longer need to set yourself on fire just to warm someone who left you out in the cold. Because now, finally, you know who you are. You know your heart. You know what it cost you to love that deeply. And now you know what it means to love yourself just as fiercely. So if you're ready, truly ready, to protect your peace, to honor your boundaries, and to never again hand your power to someone who couldn't hold it with care, subscribe now. This space is for you, for your growth, for your healing, for your quiet strength. You're not alone in this. You're not broken for walking away from something that once felt like home. You're not wrong for outgrowing people who were comfortable keeping you small. And you're not weak for letting go of what once felt familiar, even if it still hurt. Let this be your gentle reminder. Your silence is not emptiness, it is healing. Your distance is not coldness, it is clarity. Your goodbye is not cruelty, it is closure. Walking away is not abandonment. It is alignment with your truth. It is remembering that love shouldn't cost your voice, your dignity, or your peace. Because when you leave the wrong people behind, You finally open the door for the right version of you to rise, a version that no longer settles for bare minimum, a version that doesn't shrink just to be accepted, a version that no longer bleeds to prove they're worthy of love. Always remember this. In your silence, in your boundaries, in your decision to not explain yourself one more time, you taught the one lesson they refused to learn when you stayed. That you will never again beg to be chosen. You will never again beg to be respected, because now you have chosen yourself. And that choice, that sacred, life-altering choice, is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of everything.